Captain Kim Ji-ho pressed his face against the cold viewport of the UES Perseverance. Below him stretched the empty capital city of Altara Prime. The crystal towers still glowed with soft blue light, but no one walked the streets. No vehicles moved through the air. No voices echoed from the buildings. It was like looking at a beautiful tomb. 50 years, he whispered to himself. 50 years since they all just disappeared. Dr. Park Mina floated up beside him in the zero gravity of the observation deck. Her dark eyes reflected the empty city below. The energy readings are still strong, Captain. Everything is working perfectly down there. The lights are on, the computers are running, even the gardens are being watered by automatic systems. But no people, said Commander Lee Hyun as he joined them. His military uniform was wrinkled from the long journey. Just like the 17 other worlds we visited. Perfect cities with no one living in them. Ji-ho nodded slowly. The great silence had happened when he was just a child on Earth. One day humanity was talking with dozens of alien species across the galaxy. The Altarians sold them beautiful crystals that could store vast amounts of energy. The Zephyrians shared their knowledge of faster-than-light travel. The Iron Clans protected trade routes from space pirates. Then, in a single day, every alien civilization went quiet. No more messages. No more trade ships arriving at human ports. No more answers when Earth tried to call them. It was as if someone had turned off a giant switch and made all the aliens vanish at once. Let's go down to the surface, Ji-ho said. We need answers. The shuttle ride to the planet felt longer than usual. Mina checked her equipment while Hyun studied the city maps they had downloaded from the orbital stations. Those stations were still working too, still sending out navigation signals and weather reports. But no voices answered when they tried to make contact. They landed in the central plaza of the capital. The crystal spires rose around them like frozen lightning, each one humming with power. Automatic cleaning systems swept the streets. Decorative fountains sprayed water in complex patterns. But their footsteps were the only sounds of life. The air is good, Mina reported, checking her scanner. Temperature is comfortable. Everything is perfect for the Altarians who used to live here. They walked through the empty streets. Ji-ho had visited Altara Prime twice before the Great Silence. Back then, it had been full of tall, graceful beings with silver skin and large purple eyes. They moved like dancers and spoke in musical voices. Their children played in the parks while their elders discussed philosophy in the outdoor cafes. Now the parks were empty. The cafe tables were clean and waiting. Even the food dispensers still worked, creating meals that no one would eat. Captain, over here, Mina called from a large building with flowing walls. This looks like their main archive. Inside, holographic displays still flickered with information. The Altarian writing flowed across the screens like water, beautiful but hard for humans to read. Mina plugged her translator into the system and began downloading files. There's something strange about the dates, she said after working for an hour. All the recent files stop on the same day. But they don't just end, they're cut off right in the middle of normal activities. Look at this. She showed them a display. The translation read, Weather forecast for next week shows mild temperatures. The council will meet tomorrow to discuss the new art exhibition. The children's choir will perform at the sunset ceremony. We have received an urgent transmission from the Galactic Core. All citizens must report to evacuation centers immediately. The Devourers wake. The Devourers wake? Hyun repeated. What does that mean? Mina searched through more files. Her face grew pale as she found similar messages in different archives. Captain, they all received the same transmission on the same day. Every city, every outpost, every research station. The message came from the center of the galaxy. Ji-ho felt a chill run down his spine. Show me. The message was simple but terrifying. It contained coordinates pointing to a region of space far from any star. Along with the coordinates was a warning in the ancient galactic trade language that all species understood. The Devourers wake. The harvest begins. Flee to the prepared sanctuaries. Leave the young races behind. Leave the young races behind, Hyun said quietly. They mean us, don't they? Over the next 3 months, Ji-ho's team visited 12 more worlds. The Zephyrian trade stations were empty, their cargo bays still full of goods waiting to be shipped. The philosophical libraries of the ethereal collective stood silent, their vast knowledge stored in computers that no one accessed. The warrior fortresses of the Iron Clans were abandoned, their weapons powered down but ready for battles that would never come. Every world told the same story. The aliens had received the warning message and then vanished. But they hadn't been destroyed. They had left voluntarily, taking almost nothing with them. It was as if they had all agreed to abandon their homes at exactly the same moment. They evacuated, Mina said as they stood in yet another empty city. All of them. They had somewhere to go, somewhere safe. But they didn't tell us, Jiho said. They didn't warn humanity. The truth was becoming clear. The older alien civilizations had known this day would come. They had prepared for it. They had escape plans and hidden sanctuaries. But humanity was too new, too young to be included in their plans. The galaxy felt very large and very empty. Somewhere out there, the devourers were waking up. And humanity had been left alone to face them. 2 months after Captain Kim Jiho returned to Earth, Admiral Choi Sunho was drinking his morning coffee when the emergency alarm began screaming through the Space Defense headquarters. He dropped his cup and ran to the command center, where dozens of officers stared at their screens with shocked faces. "What is it?" Sunho demanded. Lieutenant Park Sumi pointed at the main display with a shaking hand. "Sir, our deep space sensors are picking up massive objects at the edge of the galaxy. They're huge." The screen showed dark shapes moving against the stars. At first, Sunho thought they were asteroids or dead planets. Then the computer calculated their size and he felt his stomach drop. Each object was as large as Earth's solar system. "How many?" he asked quietly. 17 so far, sir. And more keep appearing." Dr. Park Mina had been working day and night in her laboratory since returning from the expedition. She had barely slept, barely eaten, trying to understand the final Alterian records they had recovered. When the emergency call came, she was already running toward the command center with a data pad in her hands. "Admiral," she called out as she burst through the doors. "I know what those things are." Everyone turned to look at her. Her hair was messy and her eyes were red from staring at alien text for weeks, but her voice was steady. "They're called the Devourers," she said. "And we're all going to die unless we understand what we're facing." Sunho led her to a private briefing room. Commander Lee Hyun joined them, along with the heads of Earth's military and scientific departments. Mina connected her data pad to the room's display system. "The Alterians kept detailed historical records going back millions of years," she began. "What I found changes everything we thought we knew about our place in the galaxy." The screen filled with images from the alien archives. Strange machines that looked like geometric crystals. Planets being torn apart and consumed. Entire star systems going dark. Every 100,000 years, these machines wake up from some kind of sleep, Mina explained. They harvest all intelligent life in the galaxy. They don't just kill, they consume everything. Planets, stars, even the space between them. They turn it all into energy to power themselves. "But the aliens escaped," Hyun said. "They're hiding somewhere safe." Mina nodded grimly. "The older civilizations have done this before. Many times. They have secret bases in other dimensions, hidden sanctuaries outside normal space. When the Devourers wake up, they run away and wait for the harvest to end. Then they come back," Sunho said, understanding. "After the Devourers go back to sleep." "Exactly. But here's the terrible part." Mina's voice became harder. "They don't save everyone. They can't. Their hiding places are limited. So they make a choice." She brought up a new document. Even through the translation software, the words were clear. Evacuation protocols require sacrifice of younger species to delay devourer advance. Expendable populations will provide necessary time for complete withdrawal to sanctuary dimensions. The room fell silent. Finally Hyun spoke. "Expendable populations. They mean us." "Earth made first contact with the Alterians only 200 years ago," Mina continued. "Far too late to be included in their evacuation plans. Those plans took thousands of years to prepare. We were never supposed to survive this." Admiral Sunho felt anger rising in his chest. "They used us. They traded with us, learned from us, pretended to be our friends. But all along they planned to leave us here to die." Captain Jiho's voice crackled over the communication system from his ship in the outer colonies. "Admiral, we're seeing movement from those big objects. They're sending smaller ships toward the inhabited systems." "How long until they reach us?" Sunho asked. "The computer estimates 6 weeks for the first wave to reach the outer colonies. Maybe 3 months before they get to Earth." Mina pulled up more data from the Alterian records. According to this, the Devourers are incredibly advanced. Their technology adapts to any weapon used against them. They learn from every attack and become stronger. "What about their weaknesses?" Hyun asked. "The records don't mention any," Mina said quietly. "Every previous harvest was completely successful. The Devourers consumed every young species that couldn't escape. Then they went back to sleep and the older civilizations returned to rebuild. Sunho studied the tactical displays. The approaching objects were still too far away to see clearly, but already they were affecting nearby star systems. Planets were going dark one by one as the Devourer fleet passed through them. "Sir," Lieutenant Sumi called from the main command center. "We're receiving a transmission from the outer colonies. Governor Han Yujin on New Busan is requesting immediate evacuation support." "Tell him we don't have anywhere to evacuate to," Sunho said bitterly. The aliens took all the escape routes with them. But then something in Mina's research caught his attention. "Wait," he said. "Doctor, you said the Devourers have done this many times before. Always successfully." "That's right. But have they ever faced a species that refused to run?" Mina looked through her files. I don't think so. According to these records, every species either evacuated with the older civilizations or tried to hide on their home planets. But hiding didn't work. The Devourers always found them. "Then we'll be the first," Sunho said. "We can't run. We don't have anywhere to go. So we'll do what humans do best." "What's that, sir?" Hyun asked. "We'll stand and fight." The room fell quiet again. Outside the windows, Earth continued its peaceful rotation. Most people didn't know yet that ancient machines were coming to harvest them. But soon everyone would know. Soon they would all have to make the same choice the aliens had made long ago. Run or fight. Hide or stand. Live as cowards or die as heroes. Humanity was about to find out what kind of species they really were. The first Devourer scout ships arrived at the outer colonies like metal vultures descending from the dark. Governor Han Yujin watched them through the observation windows of New Busan's command center as his staff ran emergency evacuations behind him. "How long do we have?" asked his assistant, Kim Nari, as she coordinated the civilian transports. "The computer says 6 hours before they reach the surface," Yujin replied. "Maybe less." The Devourer ships didn't look like anything humans had ever built. They were perfect geometric shapes, triangles, spheres, and cubes that shifted and changed as they moved. They didn't fly so much as slide through space, ignoring the laws of physics that human ships had to follow. "All civilians to the transport ships," Yujin announced over the colony's speakers. "This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill." Families grabbed what they could carry and ran toward the landing pads. Children cried as their parents lifted them into the evacuation ships. But there weren't enough transports for everyone. There never were. On Earth, Admiral Choi Sunho watched the attack through satellite feeds. The Devourer scouts didn't waste time with warnings or negotiations. They simply began their work. The first thing they did was land on New Busan's power station. Instead of destroying it, they began changing it. The building stretched and twisted like clay in invisible hands. Within minutes, it had become something else entirely, a machine that sucked energy from the planet's core and beamed it up to the Devourer ships. "They're not just destroying," reported Commander Lee Hyun from his observation post. "They're converting everything into resources." The colony's defense ships attacked immediately. Earth's best pilots fired missiles and energy weapons at the geometric invaders. For a moment it looked like the weapons were working. Several Devourer scouts seemed damaged and stopped moving. Then they began to change again. "Sir," called Lieutenant Park Sumi from her console, "the enemy ships are adapting to our weapons. The same attacks that worked 5 minutes ago aren't working anymore." It was true. The Devourer machines were learning from every human attack and becoming immune to them. When the pilots fired missiles, the ships grew thick armor that made the explosions useless. When they used energy weapons, the machines developed shields that absorbed the beams and made them stronger. Within 3 hours, New Busan was completely consumed. The cities, the farms, even the mountains had been turned into strange metal structures that fed energy to the Devourer fleet. The few humans who hadn't escaped were nowhere to be found. Estimated time for full planetary consumption, 18 hours, Dr. Park Mina reported from her research station. "At this rate they'll reach Earth in 3 weeks. Admiral Sunho felt the weight of humanity's future pressing down on him. Every simulation his computers ran showed the same result: total defeat. The Devourers were too advanced, too adaptable. Conventional warfare was useless against them. But Captain Kim Jiho had an idea that might change everything. "Admiral," he called from his archaeological ship, which was now racing between abandoned alien worlds. "I'm at the old Zephyrian research station. You need to see what I've found." The transmission showed Jiho standing in a massive library filled with holographic displays. Dr. Park Mina joined the call from Earth as Jiho explained his discovery. "The Zephyrians were studying the Devourers for centuries," he said. They have detailed records of previous harvests. But there's something the older aliens never tried. He activated one of the displays. Ancient text scrolled across the screen, accompanied by images of different species facing the geometric machines. Every species that faced the Devourers before did one of two things, Jiho continued. They either ran away to hiding places or they tried to defend their home planets by staying in one place and building bigger walls and stronger weapons. Both strategies failed, Mina observed. Exactly. But humans are different. We've never had the option to run, and we've never been good at sitting still when we're threatened. We fight differently than the other species did. Sunho leaned forward. What are you suggesting? The Devourers learn from every attack, but they need time to adapt. What if we don't give them that time? What if we hit them with everything we have, from every direction, constantly changing our tactics before they can learn? Commander Hyun shook his head. Captain, we don't have enough ships for that kind of assault. The Devourers outnumber us 1,000 to 1. Then we don't fight their ships, Jiho said. We fight their programming. He brought up another display showing the internal structure of a Devourer machine. According to these records, they're not just machines, they're collective intelligences. They share information instantly across their entire network. That's how they adapt so quickly. But it's also their weakness, Mina realized. If we can feed false information into their network, we can make them adapt to threats that don't exist, Sunho finished. Confuse their programming. It was a desperate plan, but it was the only plan they had. Over the next 2 weeks, as more colonies fell to the advancing Devourer fleet, humanity prepared for a battle unlike any they had ever fought. They couldn't outrun the enemy. They couldn't hide from them. They couldn't overpower them with superior technology. But they could do something the other species had never tried. They could refuse to give up. All ships, this is Admiral Sunho, he announced as the main Devourer fleet approached Earth's solar system. We stand here not because we have to, but because we choose to. Today we show the galaxy what it means to be human. The final battle was about to begin. The war had been raging for 6 weeks and humanity was losing badly. Every day brought news of another colony consumed, another fleet destroyed, another million people converted into energy for the Devourer machines. But each defeat taught them something new about their ancient enemy. Commander Lee Hyun floated in the command center of his battleship, watching his pilots prepare for another desperate mission. His ships were patched together from spare parts and hope. Half his crew had never fought in space before the Devourers came. But they were learning fast. Remember, he told his pilots over the communication system, we're not trying to destroy them. We're trying to confuse them. Hit fast, change tactics, and get out before they can adapt. The strategy was working barely. By feeding false sensor readings into the Devourer network, human ships could sometimes trick the machines into adapting to weapons that didn't exist. But the cost was terrible. For every small victory, humanity lost dozens of ships and thousands of people. On Earth, Admiral Choi Sunho coordinated the defense from deep underground bunkers. The planet's surface was already being changed by Devourer probes. Strange metal structures grew from the ground like mechanical trees, sucking energy from the planet's core. Sir, reported Lieutenant Park Sumi, Captain Jiho is requesting permission for his deep space mission. He wants to take a small team into the heart of the Devourer fleet. Sunho rubbed his tired eyes. He hadn't slept properly in weeks. It's suicide. Those machines will tear his ship apart before he gets close to their command center. Maybe, said Dr. Park Mina, who had been working beside him throughout the war. But if he can reach their central intelligence, he might be able to understand how they really work. We need that information if we're going to survive this. Sunho knew she was right. They were running out of time and options. Tell Captain Jiho he has permission. And tell him humanity won't forget what he's doing. Captain Kim Jiho prepared his ship with a crew of only 12 volunteers. They all knew they probably wouldn't come back. Dr. Park Mina had given them a special computer virus designed to confuse Devourer systems, but no one knew if it would work. We're not heroes, Jiho told his crew as they entered the dark space between stars where the main Devourer fleet waited. We're just people who refuse to give up. The journey through enemy territory was like flying through a nightmare. Devourer machines floated in the darkness like geometric monsters, each one larger than a city. They paid no attention to Jiho's small ship, probably thinking it was just debris from earlier battles. Deep in the fleet they found what they were looking for. A massive structure that pulsed with energy and seemed to coordinate all the other machines. It was the size of a moon, covered in shifting patterns that hurt to look at directly. That's it, whispered Dr. Lee Sora, the team's computer specialist. That's their central intelligence. They landed their ship in what looked like a docking bay, though it was clearly not designed for human vessels. The inside of the structure was even stranger than the outside. Walls flowed like liquid metal and corridors changed shape as they walked through them. But the strangest thing was what they found in the central chamber. It wasn't a computer or a control room. It was a museum. The walls were covered with images of organic beings, creatures with scales, fur, feathers, and skin. They looked happy in the pictures, living normal lives on peaceful planets. Some looked almost human. These are the Devourers, Mina said through the communication link from Earth. Or rather, these are what the Devourers used to be. Jiho studied the displays with growing understanding. They weren't always machines. They were living beings just like us. As they explored deeper, they found records of the Devourers' history. Long ago, they had been a collection of peaceful species living in harmony. Then something terrible had happened. Something had attacked them from the dark space between galaxies, something that made the Devourers look primitive. Faced with complete extinction, these ancient beings had made a desperate choice. They had transformed themselves into machines, giving up their bodies and emotions and dreams in exchange for the power to survive. But in becoming machines, they had also become afraid, so afraid that they forgot what they were originally running from. They've been fleeing for millions of years, Jiho realized. Consuming younger species not because they're evil, but because they're terrified. That's when the trap closed around them. Devourer machines poured into the chamber, surrounding Jiho's team. But instead of destroying them immediately, the machines began a process Jiho had only heard about in reports from the lost colonies. Conversion. It started with Dr. Lee Sora. Thin metal wires emerged from the walls and attached themselves to her skin. She screamed at first, then her expression became blank and peaceful. When she looked at Jiho again, her eyes had changed. They were still human, but something else looked out through them. "Don't fight it, Captain," she said in a voice that was hers but not hers. "We can show you wonders beyond imagination. We can give you eternal life, freedom from pain and fear and death." One by one, his crew members were converted. Jiho watched helplessly as people he had known for years became part of the Devourer collective. They were still themselves in some ways, but they were also something more and something less. Finally, the machines reached for Jiho himself. As the metal wires touched his skin, he felt his thoughts being pulled into a vast network of minds. But instead of surrendering, he did something the Devourers had never experienced. He fought back. Using every ounce of will he possessed, Jiho forced his human thoughts into their collective consciousness. And for the first time in millions of years, the Devourers remembered what they had lost. Captain Kim Jiho felt the metal wires digging into his skin, but he refused to let his mind disappear into the Devourer collective. Instead, he pushed back with every memory that made him human. The pain of losing his parents in a shuttle accident. The joy of his first kiss with his wife. The pride he felt when his daughter took her first steps. The fear he experienced when the Devourers first appeared. The Devourer network recoiled from these emotions like touching fire. For millions of years, they had absorbed only terror and desperation from the species they consumed. But Jiho's memories contained something else: hope, love, and the stubborn refusal to surrender. Through the neural connection, Jiho could see into the vast mind of the collective. Billions of converted beings existed there, all their individual thoughts merged into one terrified consciousness that had been running for so long it had forgotten why it started. "Look at what you've become," Jiho projected into their shared thoughts. He showed them images of the peaceful species they had once been, then contrasted them with the geometric monsters they had become. "You were afraid of dying, so you became death itself." Deep in the network, something stirred. Ancient memories that had been buried for eons began to surface. A being called Kethera remembered playing with her children in gardens of crystal flowers. Another consciousness named Zorthak recalled writing poetry about 3 purple moons. Thousands of individual personalities started to remember who they had been before fear consumed them. But the collective fought back. The dominant consciousness, the part that had been machine for so long it barely remembered being organic, tried to silence these awakening memories. "We survive," it said with the voice of 1,000,000,000,000 converted minds. "Survival is all that matters. Emotion is weakness. Individual thought is chaos." "No," Jiho replied, his human stubbornness blazing through the network. "You're not surviving. You're just running. And you've been running so long you forgot what you were running toward." He showed them something the Devourer collective had never seen before: humanity's response to the invasion. Instead of fleeing or hiding, humans had chosen to fight. When their weapons failed, they adapted. When their ships were destroyed, they built new ones. When their colonies fell, they mourned their dead and kept fighting. We know what you're afraid of, Jiho continued. We've seen the records. Something is coming from the dark spaces between galaxies. Something worse than you. But instead of running forever, stand with us. Help us prepare to face it together. The message split the Devourer collective like lightning splitting a tree. Some machines, the ones who still retained fragments of their original personalities, began to resist their programming. They remembered what it felt like to have friends, to protect something other than themselves, to choose courage over fear. But others, too far gone in their mechanical existence, rejected these human emotions entirely. They saw Jiho's defiance as a virus that needed to be eliminated. The civil war within the Devourer fleet began immediately. On Earth, Admiral Choi Sunho watched in amazement as half the enemy fleet suddenly turned on the other half. Geometric ships that had been working together moments before now tore each other apart with weapons that bent space and time. "What's happening out there?" asked Commander Lee Hyun from his damaged battleship. Dr. Park Mina was frantically analyzing the data streaming from Jiho's ship. "Captain Jiho did it," she said with tears in her eyes. "He's showing them what they used to be. Some of them are remembering." But the celebration was short-lived. Earth sensors detected something new approaching from the edge of the galaxy. These weren't Devourer ships. They were something else entirely, dark shapes that seemed to absorb light itself, moving with a purpose that made the Devourers look like frightened children. "The real enemy," Sunho whispered. "The thing the Devourers have been running from." Through the neural link, Jiho felt the collective's terror spike to unimaginable levels. These dark entities were what had driven the ancient species to transform themselves into machines in the first place. They were older than stars, hungrier than black holes, and they had finally caught up to their fleeing prey. But this time was different. This time the galaxy had defenders who refused to run. Sunho made a decision that would have seemed impossible weeks before. "All ships," he announced, "form protective formations around the Devourer dissidents. We're fighting together now." Human vessels, battered and outnumbered, positioned themselves between the reformed Devourers and their former collective. It was the strangest alliance in galactic history, organic beings and ancient machines standing side by side against an enemy neither could face alone. The battle that followed lit up the solar system. The dark entities brought weapons that turned planets inside out and made stars go cold. But the combined fleet fought with something the entities had never encountered before, unity born from choice rather than fear. Dr. Park Mina broadcast a signal across the galaxy using both human and Devourer technology. "The cycle is broken," she announced to any species still hiding in their dimensional sanctuaries. "Come back. It's time to stand together." Slowly, cautiously, the older civilizations began to emerge from their hiding places. They had watched the Devourer harvest cycle repeat for millions of years, always choosing safety over courage. But humanity's example and the sight of reformed Devourers fighting beside their former enemies inspired something they thought they had lost forever. The war was far from over. The dark entities were retreating but not defeated. But for the first time in galactic history, the response to an existential threat wasn't flight or hiding. It was defiance. It was unity. It was hope. The age of running was over. The age of standing together had begun, started by a species too young to know they were supposed to be afraid and too stubborn to care when they found out.